Hello, and thank you for tuning in to this demo presentation on fossil fuel fascism. This presentation is built around a recent book that is very amazing. I highly recommend it. It's called White Skin, Black Fuel on the Danger of Fossil Fascism by Andreas Malm and the Zetkin Collective. I want to read a little bit from the back of the book because it's really an astounding piece of work. In the first study of the far right's role in the climate crisis, White Skin, Black Fuel presents an eye-opening sweep of a novel political constellation, revealing its deep historical roots. Fossil fuel technologies were born steeped in racism. No one loved them more passionately than the classical fascists. Now right-wing forces have risen to the surface, some professing to have the solution, closing borders to save the nation as the climate breaks down. And there's more to say about that, but I want to help you understand that my presentations are built around real scholarship and actual research that many people have been working hard at these environmental justice issues for decades, and we have a real debt that we owe them for the work that they've been doing. And understanding how fossil fuels are connected with the movement for fascism, I think is critical at this moment when we really could go either way. We could go towards a path of mitigation and solving some of these problems, or we could go down a path of total chaos. It's really up to us. And I think in order to inspire people to take action, we really have to understand the scope of the problem. And that is one of my goals with this presentation. So we can see in this slide here on the left, the top 10 oil producing countries, USA right there at the top, followed by Saudi Arabia, Russia, Canada, Iran, etc. And I want us to understand that tyrants are not just like despotic leaders of countries like Vladimir Putin or whatever. Look at the right-hand side, the oil firms spending millions on climate lobbying, meaning that they're lobbying against climate change legislation. These corporations that are unaccountable to anyone except to their board members, these are tyrants as well. These corporations operate in a tyrannical manner. If you look at what they're doing in the developing world, if you look at what's happening even within their own corporate culture, very cutthroat. We cannot view tyrants simply as individuals. They are also these huge mega corporations as well. But when we are talking about individuals, tyrants, of course, we can't forget to talk about someone like Mohammed bin Salman, who is, as we all know, or should know, he is the leader or the king of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is basically still living in the 19th century. But it's able to maintain its position because of their huge oil reserves. I mean, like the amount of oil that Saudi Arabia is sitting on is incredible. Now, back in 2013, Saudi Arabia, I think it was just like neck and neck with the United States for the world's largest oil producer. And one of the reasons why fracking really took off here in this country was to remove our dependence on Saudi Arabian oil. We can see that they're still in a good position because OPEC, the constellation of oil producing states led by Saudi Arabia, they have a huge lion's share of the world's crude oil reserves, right? And so what does this mean? Because this king and his kingdom, because they control so much oil, they're allowed to do things that other countries would never be able to do and that other people would never be able to do. Mohammed bin Salman, he had a journalist who criticized him tortured and murdered in a foreign country by his operatives. And there's a recording of the guy being tortured and I think, chopped up or whatever and so forth. And even after this has been made public, the fact that the sitting head of state ordered this gruesome, horrific murder of a journalist, what did we see recently? We saw our president reaching out to Saudi Arabia, asking them to pump more oil to lower our oil prices. So the horrific human rights abuses, the Saudi blockade, that starving Yemen, all the other things that they're up to, none of that matters when it comes to companies and countries getting their hands on Saudi oil. So we can see how this reliance and this dependence on oil is helping to prop up some of the worst dictators and some of the worst criminals in history. And of course, we have Vladimir Putin. And I'm glad that more journalists are starting to cover and talk about the fact that what's happening in Ukraine is very much concerned with oil and natural gas. Not only the gas pipelines going through Ukraine, but the fact that Ukraine has Europe's third largest shale gas reserves, right? And Russia wants that gas. That's in the eastern part of Ukraine, where there's a lot of Russian speakers. They want to carve off that part of Ukraine. Putin wants to carve off that part of Ukraine and keep it for himself because there's a lot of gas underneath that territory. And when we look at what is enabling Vladimir Putin to do whatever he's doing right now, we can see that Russia is one of the world's major oil producers and that there are many countries that are relying on them for their energy, specifically China, Netherlands, Germany, Korea, and so forth. All of this adds up. All of this creates a situation where countries know that they will be able to do things that other countries wouldn't be able to do because they have control of the energy that other countries need. So if you don't like Vladimir Putin, if you don't like what's happening right now in Ukraine, you should become an advocate for clean energy because our reliance on oil and natural gas is what's helping to prop up individuals like Vladimir Putin. And as I mentioned earlier, these tyrants are not just individuals. They are also companies like Chevron. So Stephen Donziger, this is an incredible story. Donziger was a lawyer who was representing indigenous people in the Amazon in South America. And he took Chevron to court over their destruction of these pristine environments, and he won. And what does Chevron do? Chevron, and I'll get into this in the longer presentation, they were able to have this lawyer arrested and put on house arrest and eventually sent to prison because of some weird legal loophole that they claimed that he broke some obscure law. But really what this was retribution and retaliation for him winning this huge settlement in court against Chevron. So they sent their lawyers after him. And now we see that there is this incestuous relationship between these huge corporations and our own government. Who do you think is lobbying for some of these appointments? Who do you think has the ear of some of these Congress people all the way up to the top of the White House? Companies like Chevron and people like Donziger. And Donziger is not some person with no privilege. He's a high profile lawyer. And so for them to go after someone like him was really astounding because he had, celebrities coming to his defense and so forth. None of that really mattered. He was on house arrest for years. And I think he recently just got out of prison. So if you want to talk about a tyrant, Chevron is one of the biggest tyrants in the world. There's also Shell Oil. Many people are not aware of how Shell Oil has basically destroyed this huge swath of land in Nigeria looking for oil. They have also supported human rights abuses. We have Esther Koible has been fighting for 22 years to get Shell in court over the murder of her husband. Shell paid the government of Nigeria to persecute those who were fighting back against oil exploration. And now the Niger Delta in Nigeria is one of the most polluted places on earth. I mean, the pictures from there are absolutely catastrophic and dystopian. It's unbelievable that this company has been allowed to go into this pristine, beautiful area and totally destroy it. It's been totally destroyed for profit. The profit is extracted from Nigeria. and mostly sent overseas, right? And all of this is facilitated by shale oil. And they're not some, I mean, these companies are not neutral. These companies are cutthroat. I mean, and to prop up this dirty fossil fuel industry, it's a dirty business. It's a dirty, murderous business. And these corporations, these fossil fuel corporations, are certainly tyrannical at the core. And then we have here in our own backyard in Canada, Coastal GasLink pipeline project from Trans Mountain. If you've been following some of these pipeline protests, you've heard of Trans Mountain. They're trying to build this pipeline from Edmonton all the way through this traditional territory to the coast, where it's going to be transported overseas. It's a Trans Mountain pipeline. And so what happens when there are some indigenous people who don't want to agree to the pipeline? And if you look on the Coastal GasLink website, they're boasting about the fact that they have agreements with 20 elected indigenous groups. Okay, that's great. They got some indigenous groups and some indigenous tribes to agree to this pipeline. But what about the ones that don't agree? What about the ones that said, no, we prefer not to have this through our land? No, thank you very much. These are supposed to be sovereign nations, but we see that same as with the Donziger case. Trans Mountain was able to mobilize the Canadian government to go in there and take these people off their own land and remove them so that they can continue building their pipeline. And I specifically chose a picture here of a brown or black guy arresting a Native American person because I think that's a very, very important visual for us to see. That being black or brown doesn't automatically make you justice oriented, obviously. It depends on what your ideology is. Are we going to support the state against indigenous people fighting for their rights, or are we going to support the indigenous people who are fighting for all of us by trying to stop these dirty fossil fuel projects that really are going to increase the carbon in our atmosphere and bring us to a total disaster with climate change?